You're tuned in to HorrorSlop, where the stories are rotting, truth is twisted, and sleep, forget about it.
Yeah, welcome to the pit. It's gross, it's creepy, and honestly, it's kind of my vibe. Hope you like nightmares, because tonight's tale, it slithers.
Straight from the darkest corners of Reddit. Real stories, real fear, and just enough blood to stain your soul.
So at least grab your bed sheets, so grab a flashlight, and maybe a therapist.
This is HorrorSlop. And now the first descent. One story to open the night. Just enough to crack the door and let something in.
My father was a kind man, but strict. Our self-contained life came with a strange set of rules. There was a chapel on the property, a small white thing half hidden in the woods. It was in better condition than anything else, due to my father's doting care. We were not allowed inside the chapel without him, however. A padlock on the door prevented us from sneaking in. This was weird, of course, but everyone in town seemed to abide by these rules as well. The women would give us curt nods and avoid us otherwise. It was so ingrained into our daily lives that none of us ever questioned it. It wasn't going to work forever, of course. My oldest brother, Jamie, started making eyes at the pretty girl who worked at the drugstore ice cream counter. She made eyes back. Soon he was sneaking off to be with her during our visits. He would leave my brothers and I at the drugstore or the park, buying our silence with penny candy and ice cream. A tense silence hung over us. Jamie opened his mouth, closed it. My father never hit us, I want to make that clear. But when he was truly angry or upset, he had a way of talking that cut you to the bone, that made you feel like absolute dog's shit. When I was really little and got in trouble, I would hide and cry for hours afterwards, consumed by guilt. Jamie and Pa went onto the porch. The rest of us dispersed throughout the house, the happy mood of the day soured. For a couple weeks afterwards, we beat on Lazo especially hard, and gave him the worst rolls in our games. After that he mostly kept his mouth shut. I caught him alone that day. I tugged on his sleeve and asked him, "What did Pa say to you the other night?" "Not your business," he said. "Don't worry about it." There isn't much else to say of my childhood. It was unique, surely, but we had always lived our lives that way, and I was not the questioning type. Our existence continued rather uneventfully for years. My brothers and I cleaned old houses that would never be occupied, and weeded yards that would never be used. The forest grew in faster than we could pluck. Then came the day when Jamie turned 18. Birthdays were frequent in a family of 7, but turning 18, that was special, according to Pa. My father bent behind the pulpit, and the sound of creaking wood broke the terse silence. He had opened a trapdoor. I felt a strange swelling sensation, like something enormous was happening that I couldn't comprehend. I channeled this by plucking wildly at the loose threads of my ill-fitting pants. My brothers and I sat nervously for a long while, until Pa emerged again, alone. He shut the trapdoor behind him. After that, Jamie was different. He was withdrawn and angry. He stopped playing with us and was quick to yell. There was an angry tension between him and Pa. Even as young as I was, I knew the change had something to do with that strange place in the chapel. I wouldn't have to wait long to find out the secret of our family. After all, I was the second oldest. My birthday came that November. Pa woke me before my brothers. He brought me into the master suite where he spent the nights of his lonely existence. The room might have once been grand, but now the walls were ashy with cigarette smoke and it smelled like stale living. The bed sheets were rumpled on only one side. It made me sad to think of Pa sleeping alone every night in that huge, moth-eaten bed. Pa dressed me in the same suit that Jamie had worn. It fit me a little better, I was fuller and shorter than he was. I looked in the mirror and felt a flash of pride. I was a proper gentleman for once, like those clean-cut men in the old magazines we sometimes found while cleaning, no longer a dirty-faced little boy. Pa stepped back after fixing my tie, his eyes shining. The harsh line of his mouth wobbled as he rubbed his thumb across my cheekbone. Pa walked me down the aisle, towards the empty pulpit. We walked in time to the toll of the bells, something I realized only the two of us could hear. My brothers whispered and fidgeted in the pew. Jamie sat on the far end, staring straight ahead, his eyes dull and back stiff. Before us lay a stone staircase, riddled with cracks and dappled with moss and mushrooms. The shallow stairs led into the dark. For the first time that day, I felt something other than anticipation and pride. I was afraid. But I think, looking back, that I would have been unable to leave if I tried. Pa and I walked carefully down the stairs. He still held tight to my arm. We emerged into an earthen tunnel, tall enough for us to walk upright, though roots from the ceiling brushed our heads. Soon, I became aware of a faint sweet smell. Almost at the same time, the candlelight revealed a door. Moths were clustered around it so thickly that it appeared the frame was made of a canvas of pale shivering wings. Pa turned to me. In the flickering candlelight, the hollows of his face were cast in sharp relief. He looked more like an ape than a man. He saw that I was shaking, and he laid his hand on my face. "Okay," I choked out. My father smiled wanly, then turned and left me before the door. He disappeared back the way we came, and I was alone. Cautiously, I pushed open the stone door. The moths fluttered away from it, forming a cloud that I had to bat away to see. Then, the bed moved. From its side unfolded pairs of strange appendages. I struggled to comprehend what I was seeing. They were arms, human arms, ending in human hands. But they bent in too many places, and they were too long and pale. Long tendrils like feathers flared from their elbows. The creature's face looked like that doll, but its eyes were large and bulging, and completely black. A strange buzzing and clicking noise came from the creature. The fat on its body rolled like waves, and the toothless mouth gaped wider. It was laughing. I understood almost immediately. I felt a mix of horror and revulsion, but it was far off, suppressed. The sweet smell filled my nostrils. It made my head swim. My skin was hot and itchy in the ill-fitting suit. Then I was before the creature. Its many arms petted my hair, my body, my face, the soft feathers tickling me. It cooed and spoke to me as I climbed on top of it, my body sinking into its soft and yielding flesh. But Jamie was looking at me also. He didn't return my smile, his mouth now permanently set in a grim line. I never got the chance to confront him. He came to me. We were walking out of one of the old ghost houses when Jamie grabbed me roughly by the arm and pulled me away. He was nearly nose to nose with me, and his eyes were bright and wild. I looked at him in confusion. "Yours is coming today," Jamie continued, his mouth turned into a scowl. He let go of the vice grip on my arm. "And for your sake, I hope it ain't a girl." Before I could say anything, he was gone, stalking off after the rest of our brothers. I stood staring after him. When the door creaked open, I knew it was Pa. He came to my bedside and motioned for me to join him. We made our way through the dark woods to the chapel. The bad feeling was everywhere, soaked into the very air. The creatures of the night were silent, and it was cold. The chapel stood a white smear in the darkness. We went inside. The floorboards seemed to vibrate, and when Pa opened the trapdoor, I heard it. I recoiled at the sound, standing rooted to the spot. I looked at Pa to see if my horror was reflected in his face. It was, to some extent, but over it lay a veneer of hardness. I realized then that whatever was happening was no mystery to him. He had probably experienced it 100 times before. He took my arm and practically dragged me down the tunnel. The moths were flapping around wildly, diving at us and bouncing off the walls. A few of them flew into the candle flames, their feathery wings burning as fast as paper. We came to the chamber. The creature was in the same spot, but this time, its body was rippling like a wave. Some of its arms were braced on the walls and floor. The sweet smell was gone, replaced by that of blood and viscera. What lay before me was, essentially, a cocoon. It was roughly watermelon-sized, white, and it glistened with fluid in the light. The creature's screams died into rattling breaths. As I watched, the cocoon began to tremble. A tiny red fist tore its way through the gauzy membrane. From the hole, I heard a cry, weak and plaintive. It was a baby. The cocoon had the texture of spider silk, thin and sticky. It dissolved at my touch. Soon the baby was free. Its skin was red and blotchy, and it looked like a lumpy potato. But its face and cry were wholly human, and as I held it in my hands, I could feel the very gears of the world turning. My fate was changing. Elias, the creature rasped. I looked up at it. Its expression had relaxed, its black eyes grown wide and shining, reflecting the candlelight. Its antennae had calmed, resuming their slow and gentle waving. It reached its nearest pair of arms out to me. The creature's arms strained for the baby, and I instinctually clutched it to my chest. It is a usurper, the creature spat. It is a curse, and the labor was long. I am hungry. It licked its lips, leaving behind a film of gray spit from a black tongue. Pa had gotten to his feet. He clutched his side, clearly hurt, and his clothes were singed from candle flames. For the first time in my life, I made my own decision. I turned away from my family. And I ran. I held the baby tightly to my chest as I sprinted into the tunnel. My father called after me, but his voice was drowned out by a buzzing wail that grew in volume until it seemed a physical thing, a wave pushing me out. Moths bounced off my face. As I ran past the candles, they blew out, filling the tunnel with darkness. Shirley's family took care of me for a while. They taught me how to care for my daughter, how to change diapers and prepare formula and burp her. I never left their house for fear of seeing my family. I was there for only a week or two, then my daughter and I hit the road again. We went from town to town, surviving on the kindness of strangers. It was usually women who ended up helping us. I met all kinds of women hardened by the world, bitter ones, gentle ones, fiery ones. They taught me about the world, about all the things I'd been missing. When we were far enough north that I felt safe, I began trying to settle down. My daughter was growing into a healthy, fat little toddler. She was the axis on which my world turned. Everything I did for her. Eventually I named her Debbie for short. I had lovers here and there, both men and women, but nothing lasted. Sex was difficult for me, considering what I had been through. I always felt disgusting afterwards, always unable to ignore the simple fact that it would never feel as good as that. And that knowledge made me feel like a monster. Eventually I stopped trying to feign interest in sex, and I was happier for it, but it meant that I never got into a real relationship. But I was a fool to let myself be comforted by time. I cannot escape the curse of my blood, no matter how far I run. Yesterday was Debbie's 14th birthday. Today she locked herself in the bathroom in the morning, crying for hours. When she finally let me in, I could barely contain a scream.
Anyway, Less like in the mood with something fun, and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
I thought it was a funny name, and then nothing else as I pulled into the lot. A single red Corolla sat near the manager's office, and the parking lot was completely barren otherwise. I pushed open the door into the main lobby, and the immediate rush of warm air was a nice respite from the biting cold outside. A soft melody rang out throughout the lobby as I sat and waited, something familiar yet something I couldn't nearly put my finger on. I still remember the first time we met clear as day. We'd exchanged pleasantries, and she'd mentioned that the motel was always empty. I guess she wasn't really used to company, but I stayed for a bit and chatted with her, and confused her dog as a he instead of a she. Layla, I think her name was. The pup had been given a prominent spot on the reception counter, so much so that I'd noticed it the first time I'd stepped in. There was also a massive clock that simply displayed the date in the lobby, and it read August the 7th, I'd only noticed it when I turned around to leave the reception counter. The motel room was rather quaint, vintage furniture and a bed that creaked under my weight. An old steam radiator sat in the corner, beside a fading brown armchair. As I stood in the shower, the warning she gave me echoed in my mind, don't look at the peephole past 12 a.m. I had a peculiar dream that night. I'd been discussing with an old man about an old kit lens that he once had. It was something he loved, and he'd venture around the city, taking various shots of it from different angles. But one day, he'd gotten a new lens, and the lens lay forgotten. He'd gone around the city trying to recreate those exact shots that he'd taken before, but to no avail. They would all come out ever so slightly different from what he'd wanted. And it was so long ago, he said, he'd forgotten where that lens had gone, and he'd never gotten it back. The next time I encountered the motel was when I turned off the highway the next day to get gas, and as the hues of pink and purple rolled in across the horizon, there it was, the red Corolla parked outside the manager's office, and the parking lot completely barren of any other car. Her face lit up as she saw that I was back so soon, and I felt a little flutter in my heart. We talked a little about nothing, and I'd complained about her monotony of the trip. I'd asked what she'd been doing here in the middle of nowhere, and according to her, she'd been working there to save up for a degree in veterinary studies. There was a certain way in which her eyes lit up as she talked about it. Before I'd left, she'd also given me a small clay flower, a token of gratitude for keeping my promise, she'd said. This time, she'd also given me the same warning as before, and it had felt a little odder than the first. As I left, however, I'd noticed the same clock in the lobby, its date never changing, August the 7th. It was harder and harder to hide what the itch was slowly becoming, as little clay flowers had started to sprout through my skin. The long coat I wore covered it, but I'd almost immediately thrown it off when I'd gotten back to my room, the fabric brushing up against the sore and tender buds almost bringing me to tears. By the time the sun had set, my whole forearm was almost covered with growths, little clay flowers. I'd run them under the cold water from the sink for a while, but even then, that wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. It was when I was shaving in the mirror that I'd accidentally nicked my arm against the wall, and the immense pain had sent me instantly to the floor. I'd sat curled up in the corner for a while before I stood and staggered myself into the shower with my clothes on. The warm water was a well-deserved relief from the agonizing pain of the flowers, almost numbing my arm to the sensation of something alien growing, and in that moment, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The next morning, her hair was a little less rough and frayed, the bags under her eyes had faded a little, and I was all the more relieved about it. The snow still stayed, and we talked for hours, and I would have been fine if that was how it was. I'd been in and out of consciousness intermittently throughout the day, and when I awoke, the midday sun shining in my face, she'd moved to the gallery in the rear of the lobby, at least that's where I found her. She'd been working for quite a while now, a new, unfinished painting, rough sketch lines and light, delicate brush strokes. Like everything she'd done before, it was beautiful, but not quite in the vein of everything else, as this was a landscape painting. Two figures stood before the vastness of a lake, and I stood and watched as she slowly worked. It was almost hypnotic in a way. It all changed the next night. As I sat next to the radiator, slowly contemplating what I had to do, I noticed a shadowy figure, looming in the corner, and I knew for certain that I dare not look at it, I dare not acknowledge it, not even as it pushed its fingers into the bulbs in my hands, as I curled myself up into a ball. The next night, I awoke with a start, seeing that she wasn't in front of the motel peephole for once. I took the liberty of taking a short walk in the cold, to be free from that musty, stale, almost chokingly humid room. The figure was gone, and the flowers had subsided for now, and for that one singular moment, I felt as though I was the freest man in the entire world. The 2 cans of gasoline in my car were like lead weights on my arms. They screamed in protest. The days of searing and cutting had rubbed them raw. And as I tightened my grip on the cans, they almost seemed to prick my hand with needle-like fire. It's fine, I thought, this had to be done. The manager's office was dark at this time of the day. I knew I had to act fast. The inferno blinded me through my rearview mirror as though the midday sun, as I put my foot to the floor, and prayed and begged the old engine, as it rattled and creaked, pulling as hard as it possibly could as I merged onto the highway. There was nobody else. Why would there be? She'd always said that there was never anybody else. Nobody who'd stay. It had been hours, at least that's what it felt like. I'd lost count, but when I still was, it had almost been 4. The shroud of darkness was still draped over the landscape. I was alone with just the road and my high beams, on and on and on. And then, there it was, plain as day, Motel Evergreen. It would have taken me by surprise if I hadn't already anticipated it, stomach churning, as I pulled off the freeway. I don't really know how to dance, I started, but she shushed me. I don't really either. You took Chinese dance. No, it was fantastic. A little smile spread across her face. Even in the dim interior lights, I could still see the dimples in her cheek. Just this once, just a little longer, I said, a little more forcefully than I had intended. The wind picked up and I felt the biting air crawl and slither its way down my back, and I shuddered slightly. I really enjoyed what we had, you know, she said, her words pulling me back into the moment, her eyes still not meeting mine. I did too, but I can't really do this anymore. I let the line fall heavily from my lips. It's been exhausting, and I've kind of been bending over backwards, you know. I think you saw only what you wanted to see, the part of me that you wanted to believe in. Did you really know me? She asked, a little more accusatory this time, and then I realized the wind had picked up, cold and biting. Her hoodie fluttered in the wind, her back to me. I shivered, my t-shirt and shorts no barrier against the encircling cold that threatened to choke the words back down my throat, but I forced them out regardless. The little Honda turned over a few times, sputtering and churning before it finally started, and I was bombarded with calls from my friend as he asked where I was. Apparently, I was a few days late to our meeting. It was then that I realized that I hadn't had cell reception for the longest time. Part of me wondered if it was the work of the motel, but then again, I didn't have much of an answer to anything. I eventually made it up to him, but I never really told him the full story, only that I was snowed in at a motel for a couple of days, and he never asked. I pulled into the lot. Stepping outside I felt a slow chill that pushed past my skin. It should have been summer, yet in the midday sun my knees ached and creaked. Her red Corolla was where she'd always left it, parked near the manager's office. Specks of rust had emerged from under the dulling red paint, dancing across the usually pristine sidewalls of the car. The tires were no worse for wear, lumpy and deflated. I thought of asking if she needed some help with them, and then realizing that I didn't quite know where she would be. The motel wasn't quite as I had left it. It held scarcely any sign of arson, no burn marks, no charring, nothing. The windows, always immaculately maintained, were grimy, filled with cobwebs. I ran my finger down the outside of one, watching my finger make a clean line through the gray, exposing the darkness inside. There was faint music, a crackling speaker by the front desk. I knew it was hers long before I rounded the receptionist counter. The little picture of a terrier sat framed on the counter, its countenance covered by a layer of dust.
Hey! You feel that? That weird pressure in the room? Yeah. That's the algorithm. It knows you're watching, and it gets real cranky when you don't feed it. A simple ritual helps. Click the little thumbs up, tap subscribe, say its name 3 times into your phone mic. Kidding, probably.
Engagement appeases the darkness. You know what to do.
Good, human. Now, back to the horror.
When people talk about child marriages, most of the time they aren't thinking of America. As though America is some kind of utopia where things like that just don't happen. It's not true, though, is it? Child marriage may not be as common here, sure. But it does happen. In fact, only 10 states actually have laws against it. Guess what? I didn't grow up in one of those 10 states. Even better, I grew up in a cult. Our leaders really emphasized the idea of pure brides and virginity and virility. I was taught, as a child, that only a young woman embodied these traits. I was sold into marriage when I was 14. In a way, I was one of the lucky ones. See, in our cult, a girl came of marriageable age when she had her first period. My older sister got hers at 9 years old. I still remember her screaming in the bathroom when it happened. My mother hadn't told us anything about periods, or our bodies. My sister saw all that blood and really thought she was dying. Maybe that is what it meant for her. Because only a few months later she was married off. Her husband was in his mid-20s. She cried herself to sleep every night until her wedding. I never saw her again. My parents were so relieved. I was so upset I actually vomited when I saw the proof, those stained sheets that I couldn't pray away. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine your own parents just giving you away to someone like that? Even though I always knew it would happen to me, it still hurt. It still poisoned something deep inside me. I won't bore you with details about my wedding, or the first time meeting my husband, or the ride to our new home. I had to be dragged into the car, kicking and screaming. Once he brought me home, he ushered me into the master bedroom and, thankfully, left me there on my own for several hours. He told me he wanted nothing more than to attend to me the way a proper husband should, and we all know what that means, don't we? But that he had to take care of some business first. Before leaving the room, and locking it for good measure, he told me to dress in the lingerie that he had left for me on the bed. I eyed it with disgust before throwing it on the floor and stalking out to the balcony that I discovered behind some thick floor-to-ceiling curtains. My parents must have been proud to marry me off to someone so rich. I'd made up my mind to go back inside and was halfway to the door when I heard something behind me. Curious, and not a little afraid, I turned back around. The thing stretched open its mouth and left it open wide for a second, giving me the chance to count its tiny, sharp shards of teeth. It tilted its head to the side and it asked me, "Why are you crying?" I lifted my fingertips to my cheek in surprise. I didn't realize I'd started crying again. Because, my parents made me marry someone I don't want to, and I'm scared and I want to go home. My voice broke at that last bit. To be truthful, I wasn't really sure I wanted to go home after all, but I knew that at least I didn't want to be here anymore, in an unknown house with an unknown man who had anything but unknown intentions. I heard a scraping sound and looked up to see the creature hunched in front of me. Even squatting on its hind legs, it was taller than me. It reached out and ran a tip of its claw down my cheek very, very gently. "Do not cry, little one," it said. "What is your name?" it asked. Mary. That's right, like the Virgin Mother. Hilarious, right? Like a joke. I wasn't let it on until it was too late. Mary. It nodded to itself and retracted its hand. Its claw had drawn a bit of blood from my cheek. I hadn't noticed. Mary. Do not cry anymore. I will help you. It looked back at me and its eyes looked almost sad. In time. I need something from you first. What do you want? I'll give you anything. I was breathless with fear. I didn't want it to leave, not yet. I need your hate. When you have enough of it, I can help you. I felt my heart sink right through the floorboards. I hated very much. I hated my parents and the man in the other room and everyone else who watched my sham of a marriage and did nothing to stop it. I had so much hate, and yet it wasn't enough. I was so sure at that moment that it would never be enough. I was sitting on the floor of the balcony, half covered in snow when he returned. He dragged me back inside in disgust, furious that I'd refused to wear the lingerie he had picked out for me. He beat me, ripped off my clothes, and forced me to put it on in front of him while I sobbed. You and I both know what happened next. It's a story many women have told throughout history and they've all told it better than I could. So you'll forgive me, I hope, for skipping the details of the next part. The next day I woke up covered in blood and bruises. He sent me downstairs to make his breakfast. I could barely walk. In that moment, I hated him. He didn't come back until a month later. My husband treated me like a slave, having me do all the chores and cooking during the day. And then he'd rape and beat me during the night until there was blood in my urine and it hurt to sit down. One night, I accidentally overcooked supper. Not burned, just left it on the stove for a few seconds too long. He beat me until I threw up, which he made me clean it up. He locked me on the balcony and made me sleep outside in the snow. And I hated him. Oh, I hated him so much. Yours came to me that night on the balcony. If it hadn't, I probably would have died from the cold. It curled around my body and kept me warm. It was surprisingly warm, you know, for whatever it was. It whispered assurances to me and held me close while I slept. I didn't see yours for another few months after that. The days went by with relative monotony. It wasn't until about 6 months after we were married that I realized something was wrong. It's funny in a grim sort of way. He was the one who figured it out. I was throwing up one morning and he walked into the bathroom. When was the last time you had your period? He asked. It hadn't been for over 2 months, and I told him as much. Stupid as I was, I didn't even realize you should have one every month. I knew it. His eyes were practically glowing with excitement as he moved behind me and snaked his arms around my belly, caressing it on the way. I suppressed the urge to vomit again. You're with child. You are going to have my baby. He was absolutely elated. I was shaking with terror. A baby? Me? I didn't know much about having babies, but I knew it wasn't pleasant. It hurt and it made you sick and at the end you had to take care of the thing, and how was I going to do all that? When he left for work, I sank to the floor and cried my eyes out. I cried for a full hour before managing to get up and do my chores. He sat there from his perch on the balcony, staring at me. My eyes and chest were hollow. I hate him. I truly hate him, I said. Do you? Said yours. I nodded. It beckoned to me, come closer. Yours leaned towards me and pressed its mouth to my forehead in a strange imitation of a kiss. In time, it said. That was all the comfort it gave before it scuttled down the balcony and left me to my darkness. In the months that followed, my stomach grew bigger. My worries ballooned at about the same pace. My husband wouldn't take me to see a doctor. He told me that I would have a home birth. He wouldn't get me any medicine. He wouldn't tell me what I was supposed to do to keep the baby healthy. I didn't know anything about my own pregnancy. Worse still, I kept worrying about what would come after the birth. What if it was a girl? See, if it was a boy, I wouldn't have to be so worried. Boys were allowed to go to school. They were allowed to choose their wives. They were allowed to come and go as they please. I thought an awful lot about that. So I suppose you might say what happened was a blessing, although at the time it certainly didn't feel that way. An hour later, the blood started. I hadn't particularly wanted that child, but I still cried. I cried for it and for myself and for what had become of my life. I cried even as he screamed at me through the bathroom door for being a stupid slut, a whore, a Babylonian skank, a devil's curse. Yours appeared over the balcony railing. It knew something was different this time. It came and sat next to me, running its claw through my hair. It was trying to soothe me. There was nothing left to soothe. I hate him. I said. I was calm. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply spoke from somewhere in my chest that had been locked until that very moment. I hate him for what he has done to me. And to the baby. I hate my parents for giving me to him. I hate the people who looked on and who did nothing. I hate them all and I want them to suffer. I don't know what I expected from yours just then. If I thought it'd be triumphant or sadistic or happy. All I know is that I didn't expect the way it looked at me, sad, compassionate, resigned. It is time, then, for me, it sighed, its voice a rasp on the wind that I could barely hear. If I do this, a piece of you will come away with me forever. Do you understand? I nodded at it. There was so little of me left, but if it wanted me, it could have me. It could have all the pieces, I didn't want them. From inside the slit, two muscles darted out. They were long and firm, resembling spider legs but for the fact that they had no fur on them. They didn't even seem to have skin. It was just red, pulsing flesh crawling out from somewhere inside it. A deep hacking sound emanated from inside its chest as they continued to grow until they reached maximum extension. Tipped with a sharp, bony point, the two appendages rested on the floor, tapping impatiently against the floorboards. Once it had a sense for where my husband lay, its claws came forward. One grasped my husband near his collarbone, the other grabbed his pelvis. Yours leaned forward and all was still for a moment. It yanked its claws apart hard, so hard that my husband's body ripped in half. By the time he awoke and began to scream, he was already in two separate parts, his internal organs spilling out between them. His agonized screams were soon drowned out by the blood filling his throat. As he sped towards death, the strange muscles extending from yours throat began to comb through his organs, picking them apart and bringing them back to the maw in its neck. It swallowed my husband down piece by piece while its claws raked along his body, flaying him open. By the time yours had eaten its fill, he was half consumed, a mess of blood and flesh that was unrecognizable as human. He twitched for a long time after he died. When yours was finished, it crawled back to me. A kind old man in a pickup truck brought me into the hospital several hours later. He'd found me walking on the side of the road, covered in blood, most of it mine, and had offered me a ride, no questions asked. I wasn't afraid. I knew that I had a protector watching over me. A guardian angel missing its wings. The police came, of course. I told them every detail of what happened. At first, they were appalled, then bewildered. By the time I finished, They were convinced I was crazy. They were a little less convinced after they found my husband's body. Or what was left of it. They wanted to put me in foster care. I didn't entertain that thought for even a second. As soon as I was able to, I left the hospital and never looked back. They didn't look very hard for me. But I was never alone. I always had yours to comfort me. I still don't know much about yours. I don't know what it is or where it comes from. Of the few people I've told, most seem to think it's some kind of a demon. I know that's not true. Nobody can live through what I've lived and still believe in God. People like me don't have the luxury of that kind of fantasy. It mourns for me. It mourns for the humanity I've lost and for the childhood that I never had. It mourns because I cannot love. Well, that's not true. I love yours. I don't love anything else. I don't think I ever will. Each day when I look in the mirror, I see something that's a little less than human. Maybe that is its doing. Or maybe a substantial part of my humanity died when I was forced into that marriage. I'll never know. What's more, I don't particularly care. Lately, I have been thinking about all the other little girls trapped in these marriages all across the US. The ones who think they've been abandoned, forgotten about. The ones who are waiting for someone to come save them, because they cannot save themselves. But I could save them. I could do it. I don't know how much humanity I have left to give, how much until I no longer even remotely resemble a person. But I think that it's worth it. If I can save even one child from the fate I was given, from the choices I had to make, it will be worth it. Yes, that's what I must do. I'm ready now.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
Strange Encounter in the Woods, by Doweather 6813. I live near a patch of woods, not far from a few camping sites. There's an old basketball court close by, stone floor, 2 rusty hoops that barely stay up. It's pretty busted, but it's still our go-to spot when my friends and I want to hang out. It was a warm day last summer. We headed out to play some basketball, mess around, and just chill. Everything was normal at first, just us fucking around. Then we heard barking. It wasn't loud at first, but it felt off. Like, the pitch kept changing. Sometimes it sounded close, sometimes super far away. Almost like it was moving around fast. My friends shrugged it off, probably some dog from one of the campsites nearby. I didn't say much. Didn't want to seem weird for being creeped out by a dog. We kept playing. About 10 minutes later, I missed a shot pretty bad, and the ball bounced off deep into the woods. Of course, they made me go grab it since I was the one who messed up. As I walked toward it, something felt off. I couldn't explain why, just had that tight feeling in my gut. Like I shouldn't be there. The barking kicked in again, this time louder, like it was really close. Still, I didn't want to make a big deal, so I kept going. I bent down to pick up the ball, and that's when it hit me, this sharp pain in my palm out of nowhere. Almost like my body was screaming at me to get out. I grabbed the ball and ran back, hand throbbing like crazy.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
At the time I found it ghastly but had to fight expressing it outright. The first thing you're taught before addition, verbs, or any sport is to never acknowledge the things in Bramblebush. So I finished the washing up, closed the curtains to the kitchen window and whisked away upstairs to return to bed with my husband. There was nothing there in the morning, no trace or evidence I could point my husband towards without directly acknowledging it, so I kept my head down. It was the 7th time when I noticed something different. To be honest, there was something different each time, a different animal part, or the sludge a different shade, or the pace at which it went was inconsistent. But this time, on the 7th night from when it started, I was becoming really concerned. Like clockwork, every morning I would check outside the window and notice no hoof prints, no remnants of meat or speckles of slime. Every morning, I'd return back inside, prepare breakfast, serve breakfast and clean up after breakfast. Every morning, I'd kiss my husband goodbye as he went out to work. Every morning I would prepare for the day ahead and drop any of my baked goods or leftovers off at my neighbors' houses. It was late in the day when this drop-off occurred. After visiting Clara and gifting her a rhubarb pie I had grown from our farm, she had brought me in to offer some afternoon tea, and then I noticed it, a quiet exhaustion in her eyes as they seemed to wonder constantly. "Not another word from you, Annabelle, or I'm telling Sophie." "Not Sophie," I had complained childishly. Despite Sophie being a truly fantastical woman, she had a firm grip and would happily drag me by the ear back to Oakley Farm if she thought I was corrupting her wife. The conversation had changed after that, recounting how our days had been and discussing how Angus had been caught running down Stonebow Lane barely clothed again. When I left, any remaining tension had gone too. I kept my head down for a few more nights, bided my time and carried on with my duties. Although, my patience was wearing thin, especially after noticing the gingham shirt stretched over its large layered stomach. That shirt went missing last Wednesday after being hung outside to dry. That shirt had been hung in the middle of the line, not close enough to the woods to quickly snag but not by the house that it was taken during a visit. That shirt was my husband's favorite shirt, and I couldn't help but glaring at the wearer. We had bought that together on our 3rd date and this thing had the gall to wear it. It pulled back, its singular goat eye began blinking, or attempting to as it bounced into its head and back out as if it was a frog. It paused, and tried again after the only reaction it could garner out of me was glaring. Leaving the pot filled with the remnants of our tomato soup to soak, I pulled the windows shut slowly and deliberately while maintaining eye contact. I wasn't directly acknowledging it, nothing hurt from a little looking, but it certainly felt great as its snout began to melt into an overdramatic sculpture of a frown. There was a large shadow on the window cast from the soft amber glow of the street lamps outside. Its hulking mass was elongating, slowly a pillar raised from the shadow towards the window. When it was nearing the top, a peak of luminescent blue and wings visible, did I leap forwards. I clambered to stand on the stool using both hands to throw my weight onto the window. It slammed shut, cutting off the tip that was peeking through and falling onto the washing machine. There was a soft scratching outside, but I couldn't take my eyes off the mess below me. It was wiggling when I left it that night and when I came back in the morning. Thankfully, a pair of kitchen gloves and tongs helped me release it back outside. It knocked on the window, the skin loose and flailing as if cloth. It was gurgling, a sickly sound that resembled someone swishing mouthwash, and began calling out. I knew what it was trying to do. It was mimicking how after finishing work my husband would come home, call out, "Bumblebee," in his lovely deep voice, and I'd run into his arms for a hug. We'd have food, talk in the living room, and sometimes sit in the conservatory with the windows open until dark. Just how long had it been watching us? "Aim B, Bumblebee, come," it commanded. With each movement its lips slapped and swung off its chin. It was as if it didn't need any lips to form sounds. "Bumblebee, I'm home," it said, smiling in an almost picture-perfect way of our wedding photo that was nailed behind me to the wall. "You are not my husband," I said quietly, placing the mug down. My hands were shaking as I looked under the counter. Please, and bye." My hands clasped around the object and lifted it just below the wash basin and out of its view. For once, I was very thankful my husband had applied for the license last year. So, I've decided to create my own documentation until I can find something more substantial. I'm not sure what this thing is, but I don't want other people going into the unknown like me. There is also the possibility I was hoping that by describing this all to you it could spark some ideas on what's going on. Listen, I can't discuss this with anyone else at the moment and I really need advice. I will try and report back to you all on what happens, and wish me luck tonight. Annie B.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
The Worst Wedding I've Ever Photographed, by Theod Catlety. Not that I really liked them though. I'm not required to like all my clients, although it does make things a bit more relaxing. Harold Seawright absolutely leered at my chest whenever he thought I wasn't looking, and Carol was clearly the trophy wife that was over the hill. I've never seen a human being that genuinely looked more like plastic than her. Nothing wrong with plastic surgery or Botox, but there's gotta be a cutoff at some point. When he shook my hand and introduced himself, I barely repressed a shiver. But years of practice helped me to smile and act like there wasn't something slimy about all of this. Tanya never said a word when she was made over for her big day. Only Carol did, chirping and twittering about, how about you make her hair a little bigger, or make her eyes pop, she has such pretty eyelashes. Luckily Carol had to go have a smoke every 15 minutes so the makeup and hair people could have a moment to actually work. By the time it was all over, Tanya looked perfect. Her dress was basically a white ball gown, a tiara was placed in her strawberry blonde hair, cheeks blushing a perfect pink. But unlike most brides, she still hadn't said a word, and those weren't sure as hell tears of joy she was holding back. Marcel did seem to have his breath taken away by his lovely bride, but her expression was less than thrilled as he took her hand and gave it a tight squeeze. My stomach turned when he leaned in for a kiss on the cheek and she quite obviously flinched. It's time I put a pin on the myth that arranged marriages only happen in foreign countries, and only people from certain cultures take part in it. They happen all the time in the US, and more often than not it's an old man who wants a virgin bride, and by virgin I mean, still in fucking high school. This wouldn't even be the first one I was hired to photograph. I managed to catch Tanya alone in the room she got ready in, sitting next to the open window and twirling an unlit cigarette between her fingers. Need a light? I offered as I came in. No thanks. I don't smoke, but they say it makes you feel better, right? She said, looking up at me with those doll-like blue eyes. Depends on the day. Usually I have 2 or 3. Bad day I can have a few more. I lowered the cigarette and looked down at her. How old are you, Tanya? I reached into my purse and pulled out one of my business cards. Flip the card over, it has a number for a woman's shelter. They specialize in helping women escape from dangerous home situations. Hides them, helps them get started in a new city if need be. Below that is my personal home number, if you just need to talk, okay? I gave her shoulder a squeeze. I try, I said before extinguishing the cigarette on the windowsill. If you need to escape any time tonight, just ask me to help you go to the bathroom. We can pull a whole runaway bride, I joked. That got another laugh out of her, just in time for her mom to pop into the room. Well, what's taking so long? Hurry up, the wedding's going to be starting in 15 minutes, and I don't want you to cry and make your face all blotchy and ugly. She whined. At the reception I was constantly being nagged by Carol about what pictures to take, to the point where I wanted to rip her hair out, but I did notice something different about the first dance between the couple. Or rather, I made eye contact with Harold's head. It was sitting in the sink, expression twisted in abject horror. The room was soaked in blood, body parts strewn around the floor. Meanwhile, Marcel had stripped out of his tuxedo and was currently swallowing Harold's arm. Whole. I thought I was dead, but instead Marcel placed several diamonds in my palm. For the camera, I didn't mean to startle you, he said. I managed to get out as I stared at the literal handful of diamonds. This would pay for more than the camera. Why did you dash? Devour Harold. Oh, I've wanted to do that for years, Marcel chuckled as he grabbed some paper towels to wipe off his chin, like that would take away from the fact he was still naked and bloody in front of me. A terrible person actually tastes quite divine. You would taste absolutely terrible. It'd be like swallowing nails. Meanwhile, a man who offers his own daughter as a sacrificial lamb to something he knows eats humans, he tastes like the richest cut of steak, cooked medium rare and seasoned to perfection. Oh, absolutely, Marcel snorted, and he'd do it again. All for what happens when my stomach processes human bone. Marcel shook his head vigorously. God, no. I kept delaying the wedding in hopes that she'd manage to find a way out, but I think Harold was getting bored with my cold feet. There would be plenty of other people willing to pay for her, even if my payment would be easily thrice what others would offer. I almost left when I had to ask one more question. I just pointed a thumb towards the bathroom. Think he's not feeling so well, I said before I was nearly bowled over by the grumpy bitch. I watched long enough for her to open the door and for a scaled tail to shoot out, snag her around the arm, and drag her into the bathroom before I headed back to the wedding. The problem seemed to solve itself that night. Marcel came back, the men's room locked after apparently someone got quite sick in there. Tanya no longer had to behave a certain way to please her mom, and I think she had a good night. I used my backup camera to make sure to get all the pictures of her smiling. Carol and Harold vanished into thin air, never to be seen or heard from again. And those diamonds paid for quite the nice new camera. Her most recent picture was her and Marcel, smiling. And she was holding up an ultrasound picture.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
I first met my brother when I was 10, by Ekro. By the time I was a teenager, my brother was around less and less, but my painting was as good as what his was when he first showed me. I really wanted him to see what I'd created. It was all because of him after all. I waited one day, in the living room. I stole glances out of the window, waiting for him to come home. When he did, I jumped out of my chair and ran to the door to greet him. He stepped back, as if not wanting to embrace me. Look at what I painted, I said to him. I ran to the basement door. I think you should follow him, my mother said to my brother. It's beautiful, he said quietly, and he began to cry. Thank you for teaching me, I said. I then felt his body sway. I tried to hold on to him, but my grasp wasn't strong enough. He collapsed, hitting his head on the side of my desk and onto the floor. The following months were the worst of my life. My brother was dead. With my mental history, I was sent to a psychiatric hospital. They said I had an episode and tried to kill my brother. I didn't. I swear. He fell. They said it may have been a side effect of the medication I was on or my psychosis in general. After many sessions with the in-house psychiatrist, I was allowed access to painting material. To be honest, it wasn't that bad. I saw my parents once a week and I was able to paint. I thought about my brother a lot. I thought about that painting he did for me, the one of the door. I tried my best to remember it, and over I tried to paint it. Each time, I stood back and looked at it. Something wasn't right and I never knew what. Until one day, I got it spot on. It was almost real. I pretended I was standing outside. For the first time in months I felt free. I imagined the wind blowing as the rains fell. I imagined reaching out to turn the handle. I closed my eyes and reached. I opened my eyes. I panicked briefly before, almost on autopilot, walking towards the door. Then the door opened. My mother stood there. "Mum, it's your son." She tried to close the door. I placed my foot in the way. "Please, just listen to me." "Come on in," she said, confused. I tapped my pocket, feeling the painting set in there. I knew what I needed to do. 20.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
Okay, let's be upfront about this. Yes. I'm a porn star. No, I'm not open to DMs. No, I'm not including pics or my actual stage name. I'm pretty small time, although I'm sure some of you have heard of me, and I don't want this to damage anyone's professional reputation. I don't want to piss off the wrong people. I think the reasons will become pretty clear in a bit. I don't think anyone really cares about my biography, but let me just say that I've been doing this for a couple of years, and for the most part, I like what I do. Like any job, it's got its ups and downs, lots of them, but I still end up having fun most of the time. There's a lot of good people in the porn industry, and even after this I stand by that. But with what happened recently, I don't think I can work again. My dad would be played by a dude named Kevin Koch. I'm sure by now you know where this is going. Kevin would come in, flirt with Pepper, and they'd fuck on the bed while I pretended to sleep soundly. Not exactly standard, but I was just happy for the easy money. Who wouldn't be? I'd never actually worked with this director before. His name was Jackson Masters. I got the feeling it wasn't a stage name. Jackson didn't give me any odd vibes. He seemed friendly when he greeted me at the door, offering me a beer from the stash he kept in the fridge. I accepted, because I figured it would be easier to pretend to sleep if I was a little buzzed. "Oh, well, it's my pleasure," I said. "I've heard really great things about you, and when I saw it was you, I thought it would be a lot of fun." "Ah, well. You know. I'm just starting out. Hey, we should go meet the rest of the cast. They're right upstairs." What a great way to ruin an introduction. Good job, me. Pepper didn't seem offended though. She just laughed and tossed her golden hair back. Kevin Koch was just about what I expected. I don't think I even need to describe him. He looked like someone who'd call himself Kevin Koch. 30s, tanned, lean, and with the general short cropped male haircut. I had a feeling I'd forget he even existed when I left that house later. Pepper and I did a few run-throughs of our scenes together, although none of it went really well. I was kinda impressed by her as an actress. Obviously, she wasn't quite in Hollywood league, but she seemed so full of energy. "I've really been looking forward to this all week," she said. "We're going to have so much fun together." She didn't even look at the script, not that there was much of a script. God, that writing was cringeworthy. Not even Pepper could have saved it. We did a few more run-throughs before Jackson actually started filming. He only did a few takes. This wasn't what people would be paying the very fine porn site to see after all. Quick note before we start. Jackson said, going up to me. I was halfway through my bottle. I nodded. "Yeah, sure thing," I said. Jackson's smile faded. "No matter what. Don't open your eyes," he repeated. "Promise?" I nodded. "We're going live," Jackson said, and Pepper and I got into our positions. Jackson counted down and the scene began. Pepper and I both climbed into bed. I pulled the duvet over me. I could feel her tiny body beside me, almost dwarfed by me. "Good night, Pepper," I said. I heard Kevin's footsteps outside the bed, and listened as he sat down on it. I felt his weight on Pepper's side of the bed. "Mr. Smith, what are you doing?" Pepper asked with flirtatious indignancy. And that was when the kissing started. "She sleeps like a rock. It'll be fine," Kevin assured her. Sure enough, the term rock was associated with what was happening in that bed. But it wasn't in relation to my fake sleeping. "You're such a bad girl. You're a dirty slut. I love how dirty of a slut you are." For fun, I took everything I heard as out of context as possible and made up silly scenarios in my head as I feigned sleep. Everything seemed to be going according to plan, and I'd likely be done in about 45 minutes or so. "Ow. No. What are you? No. No, N-O." His word was broken down into a long, drawn-out and horrified scream. The change was so sudden that it made me physically jolt. I almost got up and looked over my shoulder to see what was happening. But Jackson's words stuck with me. "No matter what happens, don't open your eyes." I heard nothing from Jackson or the crew. Just silence. Were they still filming? They had to be. I curled into a tighter ball and kept quiet, letting everything unfold behind me. The world around me was silent save for the tearing of flesh and chewing. That had to be it, chewing. I heard it clearly now. Was something eating Kevin? Where were Jackson and the crew? I almost opened my eyes, but thought better of it. What if what was behind me was something I didn't want to see? Slowly, my reluctance to open my eyes turned from professionalism to fear. I don't know how long I lay there, listening to that sickening tearing and chewing, but it felt like it went on for hours. I could feel her lips close to my ear. I could smell her rancid hot breath and feel the blood and saliva dripping from her mouth. Her breathing was heavy and feral. I kept my eyes closed. Oh God. Body parts all around. Pieces of meat. Blood coating the floor. I don't know what happened. I don't want to ever know, because I already know too much. I don't think I'm ever working in the porn industry again.
Alright, quick break before our next story. Let's check in with our resident spooky dude. Hey, you ever smile, or is your face just stuck that way?
I smiled once. The sky bled. A child vanished. Never again.
Okay, drama. Maybe next time just try a dad joke.
Knock knock. They never made it to the door.
Wow. Fine, stay moody. Anyways, back to the darkness. This next one's got teeth.
I slowly opened my eyes. My head was swimming and a dull pain surrounded my throat. I was thirsty. That was the first thing I noticed. I licked my dry lips as my surroundings faded into focus. My body ached and I realized it was because I was tightly bound to a metal chair in the middle of an empty room. The barren concrete walls were stained and dirty, the floor beneath my bare feet was cold and slightly wet. A single bulb lit the room, dangling from the ceiling by a string. It cast moving shadows and I blinked back darkness. An open door stood before me, but I couldn't see anything but the wall of a hallway. I tried to clear my head, tried to remember how I got here. I squeezed my eyes shut and forced myself not to panic. I slowed my breathing and focused my thoughts, desperately trying to summon some recollection of why I was here. I rattled my bound arms against the chair. Cut me free, please, I shouldn't be here, this is some kind of mistake. Confused, I shook my head. No, this is a mistake. I didn't do anything. Wordlessly, the man raised his shotgun, placed it against the boy's forehead, and blew his head off. Chunks of gore splattered the wall as shock slugged me in the stomach like an iron fist. My ears rang and time seemed to slow as I watched in horror as the headless body crumpled to the ground. My breath rushed back into my lungs and time seemed to readjust. After a few moments, the laughter faded and I cautiously opened my eyes, unable to believe what I had just witnessed. Questions bubbled on my lips, but he waved them off with a sharp chop of his hand, slicing the air and demanding my silence. "Please," I interrupted, "whatever I did to you, I'm sorry, I really am, but I don't remember." He stared down at me and I scrambled to organize my thoughts into something cohesive. This was all horrifying. Why had I killed myself? I fought against the fog and panic, and the mists of confusion slowly began to lift. I had just lost my job. Yes, that was the start. I squeezed my eyes shut and forced more of the memory to emerge. I had lost my job and I was about to lose the house. My wife, Tess, she found out and was going to leave me. I didn't have any way out, didn't have any options. Getting fired had come out of the blue and I didn't have much in savings. I was broke, soon to be homeless, and my wife hated me for it. There was something else, yes, that's right. She had been cheating on me. I had seen texts on her phone while she slept one night and confirmed my suspicions. My life had degraded to shit and I had run out of options. Humiliated and ashamed, I had decided death was my only option. I was sucked back into reality and I asked the only question that mattered. Danny snorted, "That's always what you people ask." He began to pace back and forth in front of me. "No. This is not hell. It's not heaven either. This is the Black Farm. And no, I didn't name it that. This is where God sends the souls who have ended their own life. Suicidals. You see, he doesn't really know what to do with you, and neither does the devil. There are genuinely good people who kill themselves. Seems cruel to banish them to hell for all eternity for a moment of weakness, right? Personally, I think God and the devil were just tired of arguing about it. And so, they send them here, to the Black Farm. Did God create this place? I asked, growing more and more confused. Fear boiled in my gut like thick oil. No. No, this couldn't be my end. I didn't believe in stuff like this. This wasn't real. I would wake up soon and realize I was just having a nightmare. That had to be it. My breath pushed from my lungs like burning steam. What does that mean? Danny spread his hands, still smiling. It's as simple as that. Feed the pig. If you do so, there's a chance he'll send you back to your life. Danny raised a hand before I could speak. I'll let you think on it a while. I'll be back later. And with that he was gone, leaving me in the dim room. At some point, I fell into a semi-sleep. The darkness in the room seemed to press in on me and my eyes fluttered shut. My body ached and my throat was a halo of fire. Thirst raked at my windpipe like sharp glass. My lips felt like crumpled paper. My head thundered like a drum. The room swam in and out of focus and my mind drifted towards the horrific sounds that never ended. Staring up at me was an armless man. He slithered on the floor like a worm, his bald head scabbed and filthy. His legs were wrapped together in barbed wire, forcing him to wriggle his body to move. His eyes were lidless and wide, two bloodshot white orbs that stared up at me with hungry intensity. His teeth had been removed and replaced with long screws which jutted from his bleeding gums like a broken rock formation. He stared at me and groped his engorged penis, his breath heavy and labored. As the armless man wriggled towards me again, his master started to masturbate. I screamed as the screw-filled mouth bit at me again and my cries seemed to stimulate the naked man even more. Get off of me. Stop it. I screamed, horrified. I tried to kick at the man, doing my best to avoid his sharp metal teeth. I brought my heel down on his head and he screamed as his face bounced off the floor. Get me out of here. I screamed, strands of puke running down my chin. I don't belong here. I listened to the two men retreat down the hallway, the clank of chains accompanied by the sound of flesh being dragged across the concrete. I screamed again, but I knew no one was going to help me. I spit a wad of phlegm and bile onto the floor, ridding my mouth of its sourness. I forced myself to calm down. It wasn't easy. After some time, I heard someone else approaching. I had been in a miserable lull, my mind a blank canvas of dark despair, but the noise roused me from my trance-like state. The muscles in my arms burned from being restrained for so long and I shifted them desperately, trying my best to prepare myself for whatever horror was about to walk through the door. Still thinking? She asked, her voice coarse and brittle. What? I was once where you are now, she said, trying to decide my fate. I couldn't believe that this was what happened after we die. It wasn't what I was taught, religion didn't warn me about this place. I motioned with my head towards the door. What's out there? What is all this? She exhaled heavily and leaned against the wall. I can't even begin to describe this place. It's like nothing you've ever seen. You walk down that hallway and go out, into it, and, she swallowed, you'd have to see it to understand. How bad is it? Why are all these mutated people hurting and killing each other? I asked. So why did you stay? I pressed, why didn't you feed the pig? I don't even know what that means, but I would do anything for a chance to go back. I can't stay here, I just can't. She suddenly turned to go. I'm afraid that's for you to find out. But let me warn you. Think hard before you make a decision. Sometimes suffering through your fear is better than suffering for eternity. Be brave. What do I do? I yelled, shaking in my chair as she walked out the door. She paused and took one last look over her shoulder. Her eyes darted around and she dropped her voice to a whisper, feed the pig. I sat in silence once again. My mind was spinning, desperately turning over my options. I still couldn't fully understand the situation I was in. It was too much, too overwhelming. The other side of death wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't know what I had expected, but it wasn't this nightmare. Questions crashed over my mind like cold waves onto a sinking ship. How was I supposed to make a choice when I didn't even know what my actions entailed? Danny walked through the doorway, an annoyed look on his face. I've made my choice, I said, I'm going to feed the pig. Sounds like you've really thought a lot about it since I left you, Danny said sarcastically. I licked my lips. You'd do the same thing if you were in my place. Danny walked behind me. I was in your place once. And I chose differently. My eyes widened and then Danny wrapped my entire head with a strip of thin cloth, blinding me. I sucked in as much air as I could, but each lungful felt empty. My legs shook as I put weight on them, my thighs trembling after their long cemented position. I groped blindly in front of me and found Danny's shoulder. I rested my hand on it as he walked us out of the room. To my relief, I heard the thing retreat back to wherever it had come from and I continued to follow Danny. He remained silent as we walked and I could feel shifts in the air. The thick heat gave way to a cooler, almost pleasant temperature, but then it kept decreasing and soon I was shivering violently against the cold. I couldn't see anything but I felt a breeze on my face, like we were outside. I didn't hear Danny open any doors, but nothing about this place was natural. It was like reality blurred and bled into itself, like reels of film melting together. It sounded absolutely enormous. "I've brought another one," Danny announced, a slight tinge of respect lining his voice. "He wants to feed the pig." Please," I begged, "let me see what's happening." Danny was suddenly behind me, pushing me forward. He guided my hands towards something as we stepped together in unison. Even with the cloth around my face, I could see a giant mass of towering darkness before me. It was a spot of black on an already darkened canvas. I vomited into my cloth, the source of the smell stemming from the hot air. I choked as the bile gushed over the fabric, soaking it and momentarily cutting off my oxygen. Danny slapped my hands away and I took a few seconds to steady my breathing again. I was opening crying now, fear and misery collapsing my willpower. I felt my bladder go. I was standing before the pig. It was the source of darkness in my obscured vision, a fat, titanic creature that filled my senses with every breath it blew into my face. It was gigantic and had weighed over a ton. Its flesh wiggled under my sweating hands and it opened its mouth slightly. My fingers curled around teeth the size of kitchen knives and I realized its mouth was absolutely cavernous. The pig squealed again and I heard its hooves clack against the ground. It sounded like thunder rolling across an open field in the middle of summer. Danny had taken a few steps back and I heard reverence in his voice, "You don't want to do that." I jumped as the pig nudged me with its nose, the wet circle of flesh squishing against the length of my face. I shuddered away, raising my hands and omitting a cry of fear. My eyes widened behind the vomit-soaked cloth. "Won't, like, how I taste." Danny's voice hardened, "Climb into its mouth and don't stop crawling forward until it's done with you." Please," I begged, turning towards Danny's voice, reaching out blindly, "Please, there has to be some other way, don't make me do this." I was a mess of snot and tears, my words bumbling from my mouth like a toddler. Danny stepped forward and spun me back to face the pig. "Do it. You made your choice. It will all be over soon. This is your only chance." Suddenly I remembered the words of the woman, "Sometimes suffering through your fear is better than suffering for eternity. Be brave." I had to take the chance. "Please, God," I whispered, taking a step forward, "if you can hear me, please, have mercy on me." My shaking hands reached out for the pig and I grasped its thick fur. I felt it slowly lower its head and open its mouth. It was waiting for me, its thick, hot breath stinking in my nostrils. This was it. No turning back now. I slowly gripped its teeth and pulled myself forward into its jaws. Its head was at a downward angle and so I immediately fell onto my stomach at a 45-degree angle. Its wet tongue squished under me and I was shaking so hard I could barely breathe. Tears soaked my blindfold and my heart crunched against my ribs. Crying, terrified, I reached ahead of me and found more teeth. I pulled myself deeper into its mouth and I felt my feet slide past its lips. My whole body was coated in slime and I openly wept, grasping in the darkness for another tooth. The pig bit down again, its tongue twisting my body so its molars could snap down on my knees. The pain brought darkness, but my howling screams forced my eyes to remain open. Something was changing, the tight walls of its throat squeezed my head and I realized I was almost through. "Come on, you motherfucker. Come on." I begged, vocal cords cracking. I reached ahead of me and grabbed onto a thick wad of flesh. My head felt like it was splitting and the pig bit down on me again. I gasped, blood exploding from my mouth in a great gush of red. It had pierced through my stomach, obliterating my insides like bloated noodles. Darkness rushed in on me and I was in too much shock to even scream. Darkness. Falling, screaming. I was screaming. Heat. Heat so intense I thought I would melt. Clanging. Something was hammering on a metal. Colors and images flew past me so quickly I could only make out their shape. Blood poured into my eyes. I felt like I would keep falling forever. Suddenly, my eyes snapped open and I was falling, my breath rushing back into my lungs in a great wave of purity. My face bounced off wood floor and I cried out as I felt my nose break. I tasted blood and saw stars. I reached up around my throat and grasped at the source of heat. It was the rope I had hung myself with, but now it was severed, releasing me from the grip of death. Relief rolled over me in overwhelming waves of thanks. I curled up on the floor and sobbed, tears dripping from my eyes onto the dirty floor. My body shook, unbroken, as I wept, wet hoarse cries rising from my quivering lips. From my spot on the floor, I turned my eyes upward, my voice cracking, "Thank you, God. Oh, thank you." I fell into another fit of uncontrollable sobbing. I promise I won't waste my life again. I promise I'll make things right, I'll fix everything. I didn't want anyone else to have to witness the horrors of suicide.
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
The Ocean is Much Deeper Than We Thought, by Richard Saxon. Part 1, Current. Part 2. Part 3, Final. They told me you were experienced in harsh waters. James said, as he pointed out the pearls of sweat that had formed on my forehead. We just met a few hours ago. I'd been airlifted to USS Orion, a sea-lift handling abyssal transport capsules for a classified project conducted by the United States Navy. I guess they failed to mention that I'm much better underwater, in submarines. I shot back. As soon as we were positioned securely on top of the Tonga Trench, we were rushed into the transport capsule, a minuscule, vertical submarine, designed simply to take us to the base on the ocean floor, 20,000 feet below us, Talos. I entered the sub, feeling excited, while also dreading the return to the deep blue. It had been 10 years since serving as a hospital corpsman, one of the few actually stationed aboard a submarine. Over the years I had clearly lost the natural sense I once had for the ocean, yet I longed desperately for it. "Whenever you're ready, Doc," one of the crew members said, impatiently waiting to drop us into the abyss. The impact with the ocean lightly shook the capsule. As we submerged, my nausea quickly diminished, and a sense of peace washed over my mind. James piloted the miniature sub. Having done the trip 1,000 times before, it wasn't anything new to him. Myself, I'd never been below 2,000 feet, and never had I been able to look through the window and admire the mostly unexplored blue world. "First time in the abyss, right?" James asked after a long bout of silence. "Yeah, served aboard a submarine for a few years, but they never go very deep. This is something else." "Why don't you tell me more about what happened down there?" "Then that'll have to do," he said firmly. 13,100 feet, the abyssal zone. The world outside hypnotized me, staring so far into nothing, knowing there could be a full world only a couple of feet before you was bizarre. I'd never experienced true darkness until that day, and to think a good portion of Earth's life had existed within it for millions of years, terrified me. When I served aboard USS Cetacea, my captain explained why they don't put windows on submarines. He told stories about shipmates going crazy after years at sea, that the isolation, or distance from the mainland never bothered any of them. He firmly believed that staring into the ocean and pondering its secrets was what truly drove men from their sanity, and to combat this, they never put windows on their vessels. Though it was clearly a tale he made up, seeing what truly lies beyond the surface brought back these memories. Maybe he was right after all. "Would you look at that?" James said as he pointed at the little creature, so fragile, yet defying the deep-sea pressure. Another light joined in, then a few more, and before long a symphony of pulsating, crimson lights formed around our capsule, welcoming us with the warmth of thousands of stars, making up their own little galaxy thousands of feet below the surface. It was the most magnificent thing I'd ever seen, a bloom of jellyfish happily existing in such hostile conditions. I couldn't help but feel impressed. I just nodded in response, too mesmerized by the sight to notice what he said, but as quickly as they had appeared, they vanished, once more leaving us in absolute darkness. I didn't ask any further questions. I'd dealt with contagions ever since leaving the Navy, and 90% of the time, they were simple overreactions. For the first time since we left the ship, the radio came to life, emitting a static sound, one that slowly took the shape of a man's voice. "James, can you hear me?" the voice asked. "Loud and clear, Captain. I've got our man from the CDC with me as well, we're just about ready to dock." Through the window we could see a massive dome lit up by hundreds of lights. 3 paths stretched from its center, each lit up by different colors, making sectors A, B, and C. There was something else lit up by stations light. At first just obscured figures leaving shadows in the sand, but as we got closer I realized they were fish. Hundreds, if not thousands of dead sea creatures littering the ocean bed, their corpses mangled from the intense pressure. Same as the Atala, something attracts them down here, they swim until their bodies break under the pressure, then they sink. There are a few theories, but from what we can tell, it's a sound that we periodically hear from the trench. The docking process in itself took quite some time. The outer hull had changed ever so slightly due to the high pressure, just enough so that fitting into the station proved a challenge. "You're the doctor, right?" the oldest of them asked. "That's correct," I said as he reached out his hand to introduce himself. "The name's Robert Lewis, I'm the captain assigned to Talos," he said as he shook my hand. "Thank you for coming this far, I know it's not the most pleasant journey." He seemed polite enough, though clearly sleep-deprived, with bloodshot eyes and greasy hair. "This is Jennifer Burke, one of our biologists, and that's Henry Gale, our technician," he said. "Let's talk," Robert said as he gestured for me to follow. "As are we. Mike put himself in lockdown as soon as he returned to the station, and we haven't had clearance to open it yet. Mike discovered some microorganisms down in the trench, a new type of parasite," he said. "He claimed they were able to withstand any amount of pressure, which isn't a surprise down here, but he also explained that they were completely unaffected by rapid changes in environment," Robert said as we headed inside an office. Seeing as he was our microbiologist, I can't really come up with another fathomable conclusion. Needless to say we destroyed all the samples, but we still don't know why he put himself into lockdown. Robert sighed. "We lost him down in the trench for 3 entire days, the tracking system failed and the comms went down. We did whatever we could, but it was futile. Even if we had found him, he only had enough oxygen for 10 hours, so we presumed he had died. Then, out of nowhere, his tracker reappeared on our systems, showing that he was moving back up the Tonga elevator, and though he never responded to any of our attempts at contacting him, he was clearly alive. It's impossible, yet it happened. Once we let him into the station, he simply locked it down and fell over dead on the ground. When you examine him, be careful not to damage the EPM suit, it's highly dash. This is hardly the time, Henry," Robert commanded, glaring at him. "Why don't you go get the equipment for our doctor here?" Robert demanded, getting more agitated by the minute. "Look, Captain, if you would just let me go into the airlock, I could take all necessary precautions." The technician left, and quickly returned with a modified hazmat suit and some surgical supplies. We moved on towards Section B. I know, it's time. She responded as she turned around. Oh, you're the doctor? She asked, her eyes red and voice trembling. I nodded. Alright, I'm going to guide you through this, no need to mess up a perfectly good EPM suit. Henry said. What does EPM mean anyway? I asked. Exoskeletal pressure modulator. Henry said as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. I stepped through, while Jennifer entered a code behind me to open the airlock. My ears popped as they sealed the door shut behind me. Both the drapes and airlock were transparent, meaning they could observe everything I did, in addition to a mounted camera on my shoulder for closer view, displayed on a monitor on the other side. Just by the control panel, Mike lied dead, wearing a massive, black suit, looking more like an robotic piece of machinery than diver's gear. His face was pale as sheet, with thin streaks of blood pouring from every available orifice. The eyes were red from conjunctival bleeding, completely ridding them from any white. Alright, the first thing you'll need to do, is to simply inspect the suit. Look for any breaches in the integrity. It shouldn't be possible, but in the unlikely event that something broke through, a self-healing mesh should have formed. It looks kind of gray. Sure enough, there was a patch of gray that stood out from the matte black metal covering the rest of him. I had to agree with that assessment. Any breach not sealed off within a nanosecond would immediately crush him, but it seemed that the mesh had replaced whatever penetrated the suit at the same time as it was removed. Next, attach the cables to his shoulder. They are color-coded, so it should be easy enough. I attached the cables as instructed, which caused the suit to light up and start unhinging. The front of the suit opened up, revealing Mike's completely mangled body. That's not pressure damage. Henry responded. Mike's ribs were broken outwards, though they had not torn apart his flesh. His chest seemed to have expanded to almost twice its normal size. I continued to remove the helmet, pulling it off his head. I looked into his eyes for a brief moment, baffled as to what could have caused his internal organs to essentially explode. For the briefest of moments, it seemed like his eyes moved to meet my gaze. No one said a word, we all just stared at Mike, waiting for something to happen. His eyes moved again, darting in random directions as he started gargling, violently contracting his chest. He opened his mouth, letting thousands of massive worms pour out onto the floor. They immediately crawled in every direction, up the walls onto the ceiling, desperately searching for a way out. Mike continued to spew out more slimy worms. It only took a moment, but all the worms had been killed off, and though my suit had partially protected me from the cold, I collapsed exhausted and shivering onto the ground. Robert had just returned in time to see what the commotion was about, and upon seeing what remained of Mike lying torn to pieces on the ground, he stopped in his tracks. After a minute of catching my breath, I got some sense back. With some morbid sense of humor, and functioning on autopilot, I turned towards Henry. Henry turned to Robert, pleading for him to make me reconsider, despite what we had all just witnessed, but Robert took my side. After removing the recording unit from the EPM suit, I packed the entire thing into an easily ejectable container, while making sure that no worms remained on my suit. All I took was a small sample of a frozen worm, packed into a vacuum container. I exited the airlock, and handed the sample over to Jennifer. She had prepared the previous parasites brought back by Mike, and I told her to get everything ready so I could determine what we were dealing with. Robert started the procedure of ejecting the airlock's content, including what remained of Mike and the EPM suit, Henry pouting the whole time. "Tell me what?" I asked while getting out of the hazmat suit. Robert took a deep breath, mulling over his options. "You're right. The real reason why we're stationed down here.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back down now. Next story's already watching.
Head Trauma, by 7 Granddad 2. Do you ever hear those stories of people getting such bad head trauma, to the point where they construct entire lives in their head? Unfortunately, I experienced one of those situations. Except, I only got to live a single day. It was the postal service. They had stopped and put some mail in the mailbox. When I finally got back inside my house, I curiously tore open the letter and unfolded the piece of paper. Suddenly, I felt the warmth and comfort of other people in the room as jolly music played from behind me. When I twirled around to see my parents, I was quite taken aback. Mom was setting up the Christmas tree. My sister was practicing a Christmas carol from her band book. She was trying to hit the right notes when Mom ushered an annoyed groan. She turned to look at me worriedly. "Han, could you go get Uncle's special watch, please?" "Oh, never mind. I always have to do every T-dash." "Did you get the mail, dear?" my mom yelled. I closed a drawer of Dad's clothes, turning around to the door. Ye-dash. I stared at the door. I just stood there. Eyes wide. The cloaked apparition stood back. The choir downstairs seemed to get louder. I finally exhaled. It was hard and panicked. I didn't feel any better as this thing and I still persisted our little staring contest. I didn't know what to do. Couldn't know what to do. I tried to assess my options, but ultimately I came up defenseless as I left my feet planed permanently on the soft carpet. I was thinking of the creature in front of me. I stunned in horror by it, sure. But there was a sort of distinct recognition I got from looking at it that was difficult to pinpoint where it came from. It made it all the more eerie and terrifying to me. And I only got to look at it for a minute before I felt the ferocious impact of the wing of a plane fly down onto me. After that day I've been intrigued by the dream. I've always tried to lucid dream to try and get maybe a continuation, but I've been wildly unsuccessful. I've told only my closest friends this story, and I always get some frightened looks from them, being remorseful and all that. I appreciate their sentiments, though despite what you may think I've just kind of given it up. I guess that there are no answers to everything in the world. Well, I'd write more, but the mail truck just arrived. Thanks for reading my experience. It's always a good campfire story.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite serves. Hope you're hungry.
I take security seriously, blame my childhood. So, on day 1, I had a full system installed. Door sensors. Motion alerts. Even cameras inside. Every hallway, every corner. Except the kitchen and the little room with the attic access. No windows in either, so I figured, why bother? One night I was reviewing footage half awake in bed, just background noise while I scrolled. But something flickered in the hallway camera. At first I chalked it up to a bug on the lens. Happens. But the more I watched it, the less insect it looked. Its limbs were too long. The posture was all wrong. Bent. Crooked. It wasn't walking, it skittered. Human. Or close enough to make my stomach knot. I convinced myself it was an animal. Had to be. The attic access was right there, maybe it came down at night and slipped past the cat. I moved a camera to that room. For days, nothing. No bugs. No shadows. No thing. Until Tuesday. At work, I got the alert, motion detected. Then, something slammed the camera over. But then, he stopped. He stared toward the kitchen. Ears back. I called an exterminator that evening. Some raccoon must have made its way in. We met at my house. I showed him the attic, and he climbed up while I stood below, staring at the open hatch. Minutes passed. Then a noise, shuffle, thump, and something poked its head out. Then came the thud. Then another. Thud, thud, thud. Nothing. Dead bulb. Of course. I stepped closer, must be fur. Raccoon fur. My bed. Suddenly, a shift, a movement by the attic opening. Something had just dropped down, back into the house. I spun to follow, and screamed. The attic door slammed shut. And from somewhere down below.
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
I never thought I'd be writing this, but here I am desperate to share what happened to me last week. So many people think horror is about monsters or bloodshed, but what I experienced felt like the slow unraveling of reality itself. It started one ordinary afternoon. I had just moved into a new apartment in a quaint old building, excited to finally settle in on my own. The peeling wallpaper and creaky floors gave it a certain charm, or so I thought. As I set up my plants by the window and unrolled my yoga mat in the living room, I felt this strange flicker of déjà vu, like I had lived there before. I brushed it off first-day nerves, I figured. But every night, the whispers returned. I'd wake up, drenched in sweat, and feel something in the corners of the room, watching. That night, the voice returned louder. Clearer. Marissa. I crept to the living room, peeled back the curtain. Nothing. Just the street and a flickering streetlight. Figures tall, thin, stretching along the far wall like shadows painted with a trembling hand. I blinked, thinking I imagined it, but they moved. Twisting. Unfolding. Reaching. I ran back to my bedroom and didn't sleep at all. The next day, I crossed the street. I had to talk to her, the old woman. She sat on a bench, her head lowered. As I approached, she looked up, and her eyes weren't right. Deep black voids where irises should have been. Empty. Cold. She didn't answer for a long moment, then finally rasped, "You shouldn't be there." "What do you mean?" She said my name again. Marissa. I don't know how I made it out. I'm writing this now in my car, parked far from that building. I haven't gone back. I won't.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
She had her dreams and wanted to start her career, while I was, and still am, drifting through life. Maybe that's why she started appearing. Is it guilt? Is it regret? I know I feel all of those emotions, but at some point you have to move on. I also haven't been thinking of her recently, or have I, and I just don't even know. Sorry I'm rambling, but I guess this is the point of these entries, to record my thoughts and make sense later. Eventually she slams on the brakes, I nearly go flying through the window. The car has completely stopped and she still won't look at me. I look outside and I can see that we've stopped outside this house. It's an old house with at least 2 floors, and I would hardly say it's run down, but looking at it you can tell it's old, and already I have a bad feeling about this house. I turn around and I ask Leah one more time what she's doing and where we are. She finally answers me and she tells me, "You have to go in there, I can't do this for you. It has to be you." So I ask her what she means, and for the first time she turns round to face me. She looks at me, dead in the eyes, and she slaps me across the face. I turn around and I walk up the driveway to the house. I don't recognize it, but there's this weird sense of familiarity around it. I go to the front door and in my hands there's keys. I open the door and I go inside. So the first thing to mention is that I've lived in Glasgow my entire life. I have never moved and have only ever lived in 2 homes, with my parents when I was a kid and where I am now. But when I'm in this house, I don't recognize any single aspect of it, but I know it's my house. I look down the hallway, and this man appears from one of the rooms. He's an older man, short white hair and beard. He doesn't even look particularly unusual, just a normal, older man. The most distinctive quality about him is his clothes. He's wearing this kind of gray fedora with a duster coat. Looking at his face, I remember thinking that he had a kind of Robin Williams look to him. Weird, I know, but that's the only way I can possibly describe him. What I do know is that I am absolutely terrified of this man and I have to get away from him. I look at his face and the only way I can describe the expression on his face is that he's euphoric. It's not one of those horror movie smiles. I mean, it genuinely looks like this man could cry from happiness. And the absolute terror that makes me feel, I can't even describe. I turn around and I try to open the door, but I can't, and I'm trying frantically to get away from this man. I look behind me and I can see that he's getting closer with that euphoric smile on his face. I know he wants something from me and I know it's wrong. That's the best way I can describe the situation, the whole thing is so wrong. I eventually opened the door and that's when I woke up. That dread I felt though, it's still with me and I'm waiting for that security you feel when you wake up from a bad dream and you know you're safe in reality. But it doesn't come. The thing is, this isn't the first time I've seen the man. At first, it was like he was a background character, almost like an NPC in a video game. Someone that you take note of but don't pay much attention to. Lately though, he's started to show up more frequently and more prominently. This is the first time that he's tried to interact with me directly, and it scares me. Okay, so this is really weird. I've listened back to the recording from last night while I slept and I'm officially freaked out. The dreaming is one thing, but talking in my sleep is definitely new. I don't even recognize what I'm saying, but from what I can make out it sounds like Masera Custa Riejo.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
It's quiet. Too quiet. Except for the occasional fly. And the whistle. All right, sir, we'll send a deputy right over there. Just keep waiting patiently. It was assuring at first, but something felt off. I did not have to wait long to realize what was going on. Still, I tried again. 911, what's your emergency? They didn't even pick up. I had no choice, not anymore. I had to stay or fight my way out. I decided to stay. Call me a coward, but I like to stay alive. I wasn't always in the dark. The first day, maybe the second, I kept the curtains open just a bit. I wanted to know what was making the noise. Wanted to see it. Stupid decision. The street outside was empty. No wind. No movement. It was as if the whole world was hiding from it. But I still kept the curtains open, just to see the sun. A tall figure pulled itself away from the car, like it had been glued to the metal. Its red coloring faded, slowly draining to a pale, almost sickly white. That's when I realized what it was. It was fucking camouflaging. And maybe, it too realized that I realized. No face. No eyes. No nose. Just a wide, open mouth, and a long, snake-like tongue slowly writhing from it, feeling the air, as if tasting me. I dropped behind the bed so fast I cut my hand on the frame. I didn't scream. Didn't cry. I just pulled the curtain shut. Tied a hoodie around it. Shoved a chair in front for good measure. I haven't opened them since. But after this, the whistle started. Not a tune. Not like a person whistling. It was like wind through bone. Or someone dragging their mouth across a hole in a flute, slowly. I didn't know whether to feel relief or to be more scared. "Hi, we have a deputy outside your house. Please open the front door." Something felt off about this. I hung up. But I had to be sure. So, I peeked through the curtain. Sure enough, it was there. You all know what it is. The whole internet knows. I had seen videos of it, before the lockdown. Before I got into this situation.
And now, as the hour gets cold, and the shadows stretch long into the corners of your room, it's time.
Yeah. Chew the spooky violin. But seriously, this next one? Even I didn't sleep after hearing it.
I've claimed something coming from you.
What? Just because I sleep in a coffin and collect cursed dolls?
Among other things. This is the final descent for the night. One last story, dragged up from the depths of the disturbed and deranged.
Go ahead. Turn off the lights. We dare you.
This is HorrorSlop.
My Husband Has Taken Our Role-Playing Too Far, by Christian Wallace. I'll admit, it wasn't what I thought. He wanted me to pack his lunches and kiss his cheek before going to work, he said. He wanted me to give him the kind of things you'd give a kid, so I packed him a yogurt, a ham sandwich, and an apple. There was also a small carton of juice, all tucked neatly into a brown paper bag. His whole face lit up with joy when he saw it. I came up with the brown bag myself and he told me it was a nice touch. I remember thinking it was the first sincere compliment he'd paid me in years. I felt a rare pang of pride at that. It was confusing. But I liked it. We'd always been each other's closest friends and now he was spending more time with me than ever before. And he cared about what I had to say and genuinely paid attention to me. I once baked him a cake and he sat on the counter, kicking his legs, asking me questions the whole time. I told him about the recipe, about how my grandmother had brought it over with her when she emigrated, about how it had been passed down for generations, and I could see that he wasn't play acting. He really was blown away by the whole story. As we settled further into a routine, I started to feel lonely again, only it was different. This wasn't the bored listlessness of a day spent at home trying to look busy. It was more like standing over an ocean and looking down. I think it was the way he started to change, physically. I thought they were all deliberate changes, things he did to look less like an adult. Sometimes he looked at me and I didn't like it. It was a hungry look. I met a boy once when I was younger, and he looked at me like that and I liked it. But coming from my husband in blue pajamas with a pacifier in his mouth and a rattle in one hand. God, I could have been sick. At one point he began wearing diapers and I didn't even notice until days passed. It just kind of made sense somehow. In the moment it had felt so natural, and looking back I seem to remember my husband as a child, not a fully grown man. I'd been feeding a toddler, hugging a toddler, watching a toddler play games. But at the same time, it wasn't any of that, it was my husband sitting there with his long legs crossed and crumbs in his beard. And of course, he wasn't a child. He was something else. Standing there I appreciated just how odd he had started to look. His hair was thinning, not just falling out, mind you. It felt downy to the touch, soft, like a newborn's peachy fuzz. And good God, the smell. It was like a baby's smell, but foul like sour milk. And it clung to him no matter how much I bathed him and washed his clothes. There were days when it felt like I could choke to death on it, and I learned to breathe carefully through my mouth whenever we were together. I was afraid of him, I realized. And I nearly cried out when, standing in that dark and quiet room, he rolled onto his back as he slept in the crib. He opened a gummy smile and I saw that all his teeth had fallen out barring just a few. And the closer I looked, the more certain I became that even those were not his original ones. They were too white, too small, too peg-like to be an adult's incisors. I secretly hoped I was going insane. The alternative was somehow even worse. As if in answer, someone cried out from the living room. I ran down the last few stairs and pushed open the door to find a small man shaking where he stood, brown cardboard box clutched to his chest for protection. WH, what, he stuttered. It was just a child, he cried like it had just dawned on him. Oh no. I frightened him, didn't I? He tried turning back but I stopped him. No, I didn't mean to scare him. His face. He stopped resisting and his shoulders slumped back down. What's wrong with him, he asked. Why do my eyes hurt? The delivery man looked as if he still was trying to sort his own head out, but it seemed like he bought it. He went to leave, putting one foot down on the porch steps, before suddenly deciding that he needed to make amends. Please don't report me, he cried, and I jumped a little. I didn't mean to come off as rude. My heart started to race. I could smell my husband, the stench nearly overpowering. He was so close I could practically feel him, but where he was, I couldn't say. I just needed to get this man away before something terrible happened. He was babbling endlessly about offending me. Did he understand? I wonder. Sometimes, when I think back, I see a flickering of understanding in his eyes. It looked like empathy. I can't be sure because it all kind of just blurs together. The shock in his eyes as my husband's arm grabbed his ankle cannot be understated. Neither of us expected him to be down there. I still don't know how he did it. But he was down there, giggling in an unhealthy falsetto rasp. Before anyone could speak, he yanked so hard the deliverman fell down backwards and his leg disappeared into shadow. With one hand the crying man clamped down on the thigh as if to soothe some unseen pain, and with the other hand he tried to push himself back out from between the wooden slats. And pulling. I stayed there for a while longer, hoping to hell and back I'd hear an ambulance or police siren. But like I said, we lived far out of town. By the time it occurred to me that no one would rescue the man, or me, the blood on the steps was congealing. My husband was still just out of sight, giggling and clapping like a kid making mud pies. Come on, I finally managed to say, speaking like the doting mother I was. Put your new toy away. I'll make you some lunch. Movement caught my eye. Out in the garden, something floated down past the tall hedges that walled in our yard and landed plainly on the overgrown grass. It was a bright luminous yellow that glowed like a safety vest. For some reason I held up the plate in my hand, looked between the two. God, I was so out of it. It was like a worm in my head. I could feel it, maybe even reach out and grab it if I could just focus on it for long enough. But each time I closed my mind around it, each time I started to feel out the shape of this intrusion, this rewriting of my own brain, it slithered away. No. I screamed, not at her, but at him. I was halfway there when her screaming and wriggling stopped. Her head was over my shoulder and all of a sudden, she gripped me like I was a life raft. The change was instant, and it made me falter. For a brief moment, I heard his feet pulsing towards me. I turned, brandishing the knife like a torch against the darkness, but nothing was there. The girl started screaming again, the sight of my husband sinking, and she held on to me with dear life. He let go immediately and started to howl and sob. He seemed to shrink before my very eyes, and I quickly set the girl down and pushed her through the gate. I pulled the bars shut, screamed at her to run, then quickly turned back to my husband, who was sucking his thumb and trying to pull the knife out with his remaining hand. After some awkward fumbling, he grabbed the handle and threw the knife to the ground. It clattered to the floor, blood glistening in the sun. "You're just like her," he said, his voice breaking and returning to the calm, authoritative man I'd once known. His beady eyes bored into me, and I could have collapsed under that stare. The change in cadence was as sudden as a sheer drop off a cliff. "I just wanted what she never gave me. But you're all the same." Suddenly his whole face bunched up into a twisted infantile smile, and he declared with joy and delight in a voice identical to a child's. I had a new knife, at least. And something about the adrenaline in my veins helped me think more clearly. When I looked back in my thoughts, I no longer saw a child, but something twisted and deformed with delusion and malice. A disease had festered not only in our heads, but the space we shared and the world we lived in, spilling out into reality like a migraine aura made real. I didn't know if it was an intruder or just something dark that had spread from within, but it belonged to me one way or another. I couldn't let it live. There was a shuffling somewhere out front, by the stairs. I don't know why I bothered saying anything. He must have seen me. I cried out again, my voice faltering from fear and exhaustion. I picked the plate up and put it by the threshold of the kitchen, its edge just inches from the darkness. "You must be hungry," I said, doing my best to smile. "Please eat it," I added. "For me." The plate whipped out of the darkness and struck me in the face. My nose cracked and my head snapped backwards, and before I knew it, I was on the floor, the plate rolling to a noisy stop a few feet away. It was whole, but one edge was coated in blood. I became aware of a coppery taste in my mouth and realized it was mine all over that plate. It felt like I was lying there for a good few seconds, agony ringing in my ears while I opened and closed my jaw in disconcerted shock. Slowly, layer by layer, things started to right themselves. There was a sharp pain in the back of my head, and I realized I must have hit it when I fell over. And there was a weight on top of me, pressing down, making it hard to breathe. Had I broken a rib? I wondered. But it didn't feel much like that. It felt like something was moving around, something sharp and painful. He started to choke me, those terrible fists clasping around my throat like bands of iron. I struggled, lashing my hands out at the floor and furniture, desperate for something, anything that might help. Thankfully my hands alighted on the knife, and I drove it, hard into the soft flesh of his armpit. For a moment he carried on as normal, but by the time I drove the blade between his ribs, once, then twice, the blood had already drained from his face. It soaked us both, and to my horror it stank of sour milk and talcum powder. I watched the realization of his wounds dull the fire in his eyes. He stumbled backwards, his face scrunching up as he let out a horrific bawl. "Was it good for you?" I asked, a laugh rising unbidden from my lips. The sound of my own voice scared me. I sounded deranged. But I couldn't stop laughing at the joke I'd made, and before long my breath became short and consciousness slipped away in its entirety. All of this was news to me. I should say. After all, he was playing pretend at being human just as much as being a child.
And there you have it, dear listeners. One final scream, echoing into the void.
Yeah. Void screams, eternal darkness, I did it. Can I eat now?
We're still on air, Roxy.
Oh no, just the spooky FCC is gonna haunt us for breaking the mood.
If you enjoyed tonight's descent into depravity. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and what does he always say?
Stab that bell icon like it's your ex possessed by a demon. And leave a comment telling us what story made you question. I have choices.
And if you survive the night, we'll be waiting.
Same dat time, same that crypt.
You're the reason we have complaints, you know that.
You're welcome.